Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to today's session on Pathway to 17 Summit. My name is Sarah Corley. I'm CEO of the Alliance of Digital Finance Associations, and I'm really delighted to be with you moderating this session today. Today, we're talking about a topic that I feel particularly passionate about, which is savings groups for a digitized population. And I'm delighted to be joined by a wonderful panel who between them have many years of experience in this field. I'm going to introduce you very briefly to each one and then allow them also to introduce themselves. So thank you very much to Angeline, Anthony, Jose and Wes for joining me today. And let me just go through and start alphabetically with Angeline, if you could introduce yourselves to everyone on the call today.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for the invitation. Angeline Munzara is my name. I'm an independent consultant, but having worked in the development sector for 19 years, and particularly for financial inclusion, for about 8 years. So happy to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Angeline. Anthony?
Thank you so much, Sarah, and I'm happy to be on this panel. My name is Anthony. I work as financial inclusion and youth for Catholic Credit Services based on technology.
Thank you, Anthony. Jose?
Thank you, sir. I'm Jose, I'm Gudo, CEO and founder of Tablet Technologies. We have a platform that has close to 200,000 members in savings groups for the past 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Wes.
All right, thanks. So my name is Wes Wasson. I am the CEO and co-founder of Dreamstart Labs. And like Jose, Dreamstart Labs is a fintech that focuses specifically on informal community banking and savings groups with our DreamSave product. So thank you.
Thank you so much, panelists. We're going to have a great conversation. And what I really love is that we've got people from different perspectives. So we've got those who are actually delivering the tech out there in the world with many customers on board their platforms. And we've also got on the call the experts who've been sort of promoting, leading and advocating for the importance of saving groups out there in the field. So thank you very much for joining me today. And I'm really excited that we're having this conversation as part of the Inclusive Digital Finance stream at Pathway this year, a stream sponsored by Opportunity International. So we thank them for their partnership too. But I think the first place to start, right? So we're talking about digitized savings groups, but let's all get on exactly the same page and understand what we mean exactly by that. So Wes, over to you to help us get an understanding.
Sure. So maybe, Sarah, first I would just start with, so what is a savings group? What do we mean by that? So if you think about it, in emerging markets, about half of the adult population is unbanked, right? So they have no access or limited access to the formal financial institutions that all of us enjoy. But millions of them are engaged in informal community banks. So they get together on their own, maybe 20 or so together at the same time, and they form their own savings and loan associations where they save together, they do internal loans to each other, and then use the profits from that to grow their small businesses and enhance. So that community bank becomes their social safety net, their savings, and their access to capital. So when we say a digital savings group, what we really mean is that these informal groups, which are typically done on paper cash and handwriting hundreds of transactions by hand in paper ledgers, that you're digitizing some part of that. So you might digitize the record keeping so that all of that becomes automated and simple, and you're creating credit scores for them and helping them ultimately connect into formal financial institutions. Or you may digitize the financial transactions. So instead of bringing paper cash to a meeting, for example, you might be able to use mobile money or some other form of digital transaction. So basically anything along that spectrum where you're using mobile to digitize either the transactions or the record keeping, or maybe both, would constitute a digital savings group. So that's what we're talking about in this session.
Okay, and thank you very much for that scene setting there. So we know that they're really important, but I think the next question I'm going to pose to Anthony will help the audience and others who are interested in this topic in particular the size of saving groups. When we talk about savings groups, but can you give us an idea of the numbers that we're talking about here? And I know it's tricky because there are some that are reported, and and then there's a lot of obviously informality to this, as Wes was sort of indicating there. So Anthony, what picture are we looking at? Why are we even having this conversation today, right?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And as you rightly put, the informality of the sector actually makes reporting a bit of a challenge. And a good place to start is the Global Findex 2021 database, which says 420 million people are saving informally. And most of those are actually in savings groups. And as pointed by Wes, these groups are in different forms and structures, and most of them promoted by national and international NGOs, which also have their own reporting index. But they are covering most countries like in Latin America, Africa, Asia, and in different self-help groups, Roscas, rotating savings and credit associations, accumulating savings and credit associations, which now are being formatted into village savings and loan associations, the savings and internal lending communities, savings for change. So as you come across the landscape of NGOs, you'll find different models, but they are all form part of the savings group. So globally, it's a big number, 420 million, which is a big market. And it gives us an opportunity to actually see how that market can be digitized to encourage that market to get into the digital economy. Back to you.
420 million. I mean, that was a number that blew my mind when I saw it written in black and white in the conversations that we were having before today's session. I didn't expect it to be that big. Angeline, from your perspective, were you shocked by the number, or did you have a feeling that it was this big?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sarah. I think that number is magnificent and it is shocking, but I would like to still believe that it is still a drop in the ocean, given the fact that this methodology is self-replicating because of the benefits that comes out of savings groups. A lot of people are saving together to have access to small loans to finance their business activities. And it is also a platform to build social cohesion, to build trust, to build self-confidence, particularly amongst women. So it is mushrooming and uncontrollable. That's what I can say. So the numbers might even be bigger than that. And I can say that from experience, because even professionals are also establishing savings groups. I, for example, have helped to establish 10 savings groups of professional women, and they have self-replicated and mushroomed. I don't know how many people have impacted already, but they are not reporting in any way. So this number is just a drop in the ocean, I must say. Magnificent, yes, but there are more than to this.
Fabulous. I mean, it's really substantial part of when we talk about the importance of savings. These groups are obviously playing an enormous role across the globe. You were talking about, Anthony, in all the continents, we will see some form of savings group, either formal or informal. And that I love the word mushrooming. I'm going to use that word, Angeline, because I think it's a wonderful word to think about how being part in one successful savings group encourages you to either form or join others, or also to encourage your friends and family to be part of that. And that positivity that can come from these savings groups, it's incredibly important in terms of financial inclusion, resilience that obviously we're trying to address with these groups. But obviously there's going to be barriers, and what we very much clearly don't want to talk about is go through all the barriers, because I think many people listening on the session today will know what are those barriers and are. So rather than talk about them, what I'd really love to do is sort of start to think about how savings groups and the methodology and how we are digitizing can start to overcome or deal with some of these barriers. So Anthony, I'm going to come back to you, given that you've spent many years working on capacity and literacy in particular. How is digitization helping overcome that barrier?
Yeah, digitization in a way introduces its own challenges as well, because in the space of digitalization, you're getting also other areas you need to address. But regardless of that, it helps to really ensure that you're able to introduce ideas on people's gadgets in their own hands, putting solutions within their own hands. And barriers include, to addressing those barriers include you're looking at how you can ensure digital literacy is acquired, because it goes beyond introducing the app themselves. But again, the gadgets on which these apps are hosted can also be barriers on their own. And I think that has been discussed severally, especially when you talk about it from the gender perspective, because phone ownership, the first thing is actually phone ownership. So if you get to a space whereby people in the first instance do not own phones, you have to deal with that. But again, those who own phones and they're owning feature phones, you have to introduce again the aspect of smartphones, which is again another barrier which has to be addressed. And so training becomes a key area, and training meaning hand-holding and working with the households for some time. So you have to be patient also as an implementer of these digital savings groups, so that you have the houses actually interacting with you and giving you feedback, and you iterate. And most of the applications you have on the market today have gone through that process. So we are seeing change. It's taking time, but we are seeing a lot of traction now, given that most of the agencies are now getting into that space.
Great. It's positive to hear so much traction happening there. And I'm also going to flag to our audience as well, there's a wonderful session running this afternoon at 5 minutes past 3 o'clock South African time that is actually tackling smartphone ownership. So I encourage those people that are particularly interested in that to join that session this afternoon. But going back to our discussion, Angeline, I'm going to come to you next, because I think one of the barriers that we know is, and it comes back to that literacy is, we know that older people struggle with technology more than the youth. You had some wonderful examples of how we can utilize the youth. And I wonder if you could share some of those thoughts with us.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Sarah. We all know that the traditional methodology of savings groups is to bring groups together, but with digitization, it has actually changed the trajectory to digitize things that sometimes groups don't need to meet, and that's one of the fears around disrupting the social cohesion element of savings groups. And I must say that there are different ways to address the challenges of technology gaps that are there in terms of addressing the social cohesion element. For example, the solution is to work with the savings groups to digitize one part of the methodology. For example, you can just digitize the savings group ledger and still allow these groups to meet, for example. So you're taking them on a step-by-step process until they are comfortable to digitize the whole process. And secondly, to divide this age gap, it is critical that we do establish mixed savings groups whereby we bring in youths as participants or members of the group, because they are tech savvy, they quickly get hand of things. I normally talk about how my daughter, for example, understands my phone better than myself. So this is the same with the youth in the saving group. They easily understand how to operate a smartphone, so they can help their parents, their caregivers to be tech savvy and accelerate the process. But at the same time, the beauty of it is that we always say, catch them when they are young, right? In the same process, you are also bringing financial inclusion to the youth so that we can break that cycle, perpetual cycle of poverty within families. So they are getting the gist of saving at an early age. So I think this is the best solution that we can take on board to scale up digitization of savings groups.
What a wonderful way to build that resilience from an information at a young age, right? So we're having a whole new generation potentially growing up with much more information about managing their own finances and empowered to be part of savings groups from a very young age. And I also love, Angeline, that you brought in that social cohesion element, right? Because that's what makes digitized, or even savings groups, or whether digital or not, that's the key thing that people, is one of the success factors, right, of savings groups, is that social cohesion. We're not talking about individuals interacting with sort of a faceless financial services provider, which is quite often certainly how I save. It's actually about interacting in that peer network and community and learning, and it is a key significant part of this that we shouldn't miss out. And Angeline, the digitization bit, there's obviously the fear that that's going to be lost, but actually there's probably a lot of gains that can be made from for that group as a whole as a result of digitizing. So would you be able to share with us what you feel some of the key benefits for digitization would bring to that group?
Thank you so much, Sarah. When you digitize, particularly we do savings groups in the hard to reach, communities where financial services are hard, to reach. They have limited access to banks. They have limited access to microfinance products, for example. So savings group becomes a platform for them. So when you digitize, one of the benefits is to be able to build a credit score for this savings group, to be able to access microfinance products, which provides them with additional loans to increase their livelihood activities, for example. But also, we find that digitization in areas where there is a lot of security issues being a challenge, it is a good way to actually secure the funding of the group. We have seen some saving group members actually calling for digitization themselves for security issues because they've been experiencing a lot of theft happening, in that area. But also, let me just say that COVID-19 really taught us a big lesson, Sarah, that business as usual is no longer an option. We need to be able to better prepare these communities to be able to respond better to shocks and pandemics such as COVID-19, which brought about restriction in movements of community members, savings members. They could not gather as usual, but with the digitization, they were able to continue with their savings groups, technologically, when everything is being digitized, it allows continuity. So this is part of disaster, preparedness, I must say, for unforeseen pandemics in the future as well.
Yeah. And as we're hearing, COVID certainly is not going to be the last pandemic or, experience that we are going to have where there might be restrictions to movement, for example. So I think it's really wonderful that we have a way that enables, continued resilience during these really difficult times through digitization. Anthony, I'm going to come across to you before I loop Wes and Jose into the conversation. Anthony, any other benefits that you're seeing from the work that you've done?
I think we have seen top on the list is the improved accuracy of records, especially as groups mature towards the cycle end. You find that the amounts of savings and loans that they are transacting, they get large amounts. And especially in context of lower literacy levels, the time it takes to actually do those computations and the related error, which eventually brings conflicts at the time of share out, has become an issue, especially for the agents who are managing those groups. So accuracy of record keeping has been a great benefit for most of these groups. And one of the things they usually mention is they're actually able now to be more confident with their groups because now they are sure about the calculations. And related to that, of course, and that's the part I like, is they spend less time in the group. And that addresses the issue of time poverty, which we all know is a big issue, especially for rural women. And if you save much time from the groups, then you can use that time to engage more with your livelihood activity, which actually addresses poverty directly. So for me, that social benefit for digitization is key. And that's why personally, I prefer to drive it more than even the financial benefits, because I know what that means, especially for the women. And of course, building on Angeline's point, promoting savings groups is about increasing resilience. And once we digitize, we're able to introduce these households, as I said before, in the digital economy. And we know it has a lot of benefits because linkages will now occur between these groups and the financial and non-financial service providers, including solar payable companies. So we see a lot of benefits coming along. So we still have a lot of ground to cover, and we see the benefits, and we are actually making sure that there is a business case for the financial sector, formal, and also there's a value proposition for the demand side, which is the savings groups themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I think that's wonderful there, that bringing in the time saving and actually being able to utilize time for other things to help grow. Maybe that's around education, maybe that's around health, maybe that's their own livelihood, whatever it is, it releases and frees that time to focus more on more productive things as a result of that digitization, which is great. And I love that you sort of talk about confidence, right? Improving people's confidence with, potentially with other, digital finance tools, services, etc. there as well. I think these benefits, they're obviously great, right? And going to make significant impact in people's lives, increase their resilience, increase the potential for economic growth. Whereas I'm going to come over to you, because I know you've got ideas to even to take these and scale these and grow these benefits, even further, new products, new services, sort of pushing the boundaries of what we see as a savings group in some ways.
Yeah. So as DreamStart Labs worked in this space with these groups, and I wish all of you who have never seen one of these groups in action could just see it, because it's the most inspiring thing in the world. You see this, this confidence come in, people who have never touched one of these phones before, and they sent this sense of like, I'm a modern progressive, leader. It's amazing. But so one of the things that occurred to us though is these groups, like I said, this is their social safety net, their bank, sort of their everything. This is not a side hobby. And so if you can digitize that, you've digitized something central to their life, you have now the capability to come on top of that and add all sorts of services. They can be financial services. Like, for example, at DreamStart Labs, we have been offering these groups microequity, right? Where we come in and say, we will invest in your group because we believe in you, right? And then we can participate as if we were one of those members. So we can earn some profit if you're successful, but we sort of, either win or lose alongside you. That's been really successful. Bringing in micro insurance. So as a group, they can command much lower rates and suddenly take so much of that risk that they have and reduce that in their environments. Intergroup lending suddenly becomes possible. So because we have visibility into, these groups over here have a little bit of extra capital, right, that they're not using. And these groups over here have a high demand for loans and business ideas, but don't have it. Well, we can introduce them to each other and say, here's credit scores, here's a trusted digital platform, and allow them to do these sorts of things there. We can allow NGOs and governments to do rapid communications to all of these groups through digital. So the next health crisis or weather crisis or anything like that that comes along, we can do that. We can allow data collection through them. So there's a whole range of these services that suddenly become possible for the first time if you're digitizing this really, really central piece. And I think the beauty of it is because it's a collective, right? Because you have 20, 30 people together, you see the people who would be on the margins of society, the ones who have lower education, lower literacy, lower confidence, suddenly they can participate in these things right alongside everybody else. And that's an amazing thing. I challenge you to find many things in international development or financial services where that kind of access is possible. And it is possible with digital savings groups. It's the first time I've seen it in my career.
I mean, it's so heartening to hear actually, so many benefits that are immediately available, and then all these extra things going on top. I mean, I find it really inspiring that we're talking about things like wealth management here, enabling, those things that often we think are terms that apply to the super rich. Actually, we can do all of this. We're not talking about people here who are saving minuscule amounts, where actually this market, I mean, we talked about 420 million people. I don't know what that translates into dollars, but I would imagine there's a significant amount of money here. And that's where I want to sort of start to pivot our conversation, to start to think a little bit here about what do we need to leverage these additional barriers and kind of some of the business models behind this. So let's tackle the question around, obviously if digital savings groups are going to start, going into different areas, I'm guessing support from a regulator is needed. So Jose, I know that you're doing some work with Central Bank in Mozambique. I'd love to know more.
Thank you, Sarah. I think we are trying to work with the central bank for three main reasons. With the maturity of these groups, it comes growth, and growth means more members, means more savings, and also means more loans. So it starts to become tricky just to rely on trust among themselves. So you also need somebody to come in and validate that trust model, right? That's why we have approached the central bank to see if they can be of support of this activity, but also for AML aspects of it. So savings groups are informal. Most of the time, we're struggling here to come up with to see what are the numbers, what's really happening in this context. So can we imagine how much AML the central banks would be focused on? So how much money does this move? Who? What's origin of funds? You know, everything around AML starts to become an issue. So with growth, central banks, obviously, we believe the central banks needs to be involved. Second is the transition from the so-called box, right, where they save to actual move the funds to a financial institution. You know, banks will ask you for origin of funds. And if I'm a farmer and I just sold 50 tons of soybeans, I will not have origin of funds. So that can become tricky for now us opening a bank account as a group, and then the bank allowing us to deposit 10 months worth of savings that can be thousands of dollars. So the central bank, we believe if the central bank is involved from the beginning, they can be the bridge to facilitate these banks, allowing these groups to also deposit. Obviously, there's a lot of comments and discussions around the linkage with banks, but we often forget this part, which is, you know, origin of funds, these groups being informal. And third, we are the ones, I'm talking about Tableau Tech, Dreamstar Labs, we are the ones implementing tools that helps them govern themselves. But I believe that somebody needs to supervise us, right? Otherwise, it becomes, we have space to commit fraudulent activities. I'm not saying that we are doing that, but I'm a product of savings groups. My mother paid my university with savings groups money. So I know that our biggest goal is not only to help digitize, to improve the livelihood of these groups, but mostly is to actually help improve the sector so it can become more resilient. We're talking about 500 million people. There is no formalized sector. As the central banks don't necessarily recognize these groups. So we need to shine a bit of light so the central banks can come in. And we're trying to do that by creating a framework here in Mozambique that maybe other emerging markets, central banks can actually copy and implement. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. I think for flagging the importance of that support from, you know, the central bank and how it will become crucial the more we want to grow, mushroom these groups, and, you know, to start adding on new products and expanding onto new areas. I want to loop back in the last part of our conversation, because we're getting towards the end, and I'm encouraging also our audience listening to us to post their questions into the chat for us too. But one of the last things I want to talk about is business models. So we often hear it's not profitable, it's not possible to deliver services to the rural, to the poor. Yet we're hearing quite a different story, I think, here in our conversation today. How many people are involved in saving groups, how much money they're saving. To me, it tells me that, you know, it is possible to create a business model that can work. And the fact that Wes and Jose, you are on this call with us and have companies too, tells me that's the case. Maybe I can start with you, Wes, if you can sort of, I don't know, like let us know how Dreamstar Labs came about and what is your business model and how you're managing to run your organization and meet these these needs out there.
Well, first of all, I would say it is impossible without digital, right? Because individually, any one member in these groups is saving an amount that would be hard for a fintech or a bank or somebody else to profit, because it would be too hard to even access that person. Where are they? How would I find them? The cost of that transaction would be too expensive. This is one of the fundamental reasons why they're excluded today. But I think what people miss is, once you digitize, collectively, these are large amounts of money. The very first market, DreamSave, our product, is in markets across today, Africa, Asia, Latin America. So we're in multiple spaces. But just as one example, our very first market was in Tanzania, right? So one country, reasonably small economy on the global scale. In these groups we're talking about today, in the the simple metal boxes with cash in them, we estimated, this was 4 years ago, there was $6 billion US in those boxes, right? Now you suddenly connect that into digital, and that's serious money. Now, if you can then provide a small service where they become more successful, all the benefits that you talked about here, and then suddenly you can make that available, obviously through the permission of the groups to say, would you like us to present your credit score to a bank, right? Now suddenly a bank who says these people are they're too hard to reach, that's too expensive. Now they look at this and they say, this is half of our economy. This is half of our market. And now for the first time, it's actually available to us. Then we can provide leverage to them to say, now you have to come in and offer them a fair interest rate on a loan, fair interest earnings on savings, all of these products that you have. And that's a powerful thing to be able to do, right? And so for the first time, these people who had been invisible, they now have collective power, right? That's never happened before. And so I think for DreamStart Labs, our business model, we're not making money off the individuals, our the users of our product. For the most part, our goal is to bring them this value. NGOs and governments and things like this, we see as partners, right? So what we will monetize is if I can show you that we provide you value and make your savings experience and help you achieve your financial goals, then I can bring you into banks and MFIs or financial services that we can offer, like microequity or microinsurance. And then we can make a little bit of profit off of that. So that becomes a sustainable business model. It only works if we get scale, right? So the only way you get to scale is you have to build a product that's delightful, that the end users say, I can't see myself living without. You can't go and build something for a government. You can't build it around what an NGO wants, right? You have to build it around what that end user in the field wants. And again, the only way to do that, I think, is you start with a perspective that this is not some, poor, uneducated, whatever person. This person is as smart as I am. This person is as capable as I am. They lack access and opportunity. If I can unlock that, then we all win, right? And to me, that's a powerful thing.
I'm just amazed when you said $6 billion. Again, that's another figure that's blown my mind already. The collective, and you said, we've all said this word, I think, a lot on this call, the collective potential and power of these groups is phenomenal. I'm going to come across to Angeline and Anthony next. So Angeline, I'll start with you. NGOs are known, obviously, of sort of funding, often in kicking off the savings groups. What is sort of the hope or the plan, or from that perspective, what is the business model the reason why NGOs are funding, I suppose, these groups?
The big agenda is financial inclusion, and as Wes put it, most of these groups have needs that relate to finances, and most of the time, most of these groups are not able to attract the brick and mortar and the formal sector financial institution or services as we know them. And so building on what they already have been doing for generations, the rotating savings and credit associations, NGOs have come into that space to help organize it and structure it, make it at least resemble the formal sector. And that's how now it becomes easy even for the digital initiatives to actually pick them up, because when you talk about the 420 million informal savings, some of them are not structured. So when you talk about digitization, you can only work in the space that is structured, and the NGO has actually played a very big role on that. And the aspect of aggregation is key, because if you talk about numbers, they are already aggregated under the NGO space, and that makes it easy to have conversations. So the issue of digitization is actually to make the data from those groups more visible than it was before, because financial sector institutions, the non-financial sector, all in the formal sector, always want to talk and have conversations based on data. And if that is not on the table, then you actually all groping in the dark. So NGOs have a role to promote financial inclusion. And do not forget that most of the MFIs, microfinance institutions, some of them were actually set up by NGOs. So the question is, why have NGOs gone back to the traditional models? Because there is still a group of households that have been left behind who still deserve to be included financially. And we hope as we digitize, we are digitizing with our eyes on inclusivity. We don't want to lose some in the process. Thank you.
Angeline?
Sure, thank you, Sarah. Let me just begin by highlighting the fact that INGOs, our dream is not to see these groups continue serving in boxes forever. Financial inclusion entails that we dream to connect them to banks, to microfinance institutions, to have them digitized. That's the end goal. The reason why we are starting with cash boxes is because these communities are in the hard to reach areas where they have limited access to financial services. So bringing them together in savings groups and saving in those boxes is just an entry point and not an end in itself, I must say. And I must emphasize at this point to say, as INGOs, it's not really about funding these savings groups, but it is an empowered worldview approach where we are focusing on the transformation of a mindset of an individual to understand that they have social capital within their communities, and that by coming together, they are able to save together and be responsible for their own transformation. And this is the reason why, for example, where we integrate financial inclusion in cash transfer programs, for example, to say, we are coming in, but we want you to start learning financial literacy. The cash transfers that we are providing you is not meant for you to live, from day to day without looking into the future. Let's start saving what you have, build the social capital, and then let's look at how we are going to graduate you out of poverty in a way that you become strong and be able to stand on your own and be linked to other microfinance products or be linked to banks or be exposed to digitization. So most often the funding is very, very limited to savings groups by NGOs. We are focusing on building capacity, on building self-confidence, on building the capacity of village agents to say, you need to continue, as I said, mushrooming aspect of it. Beyond the program cycle, these groups need to replicate, self-replicate, and it is the community members who need to take ownership of that, whether with or without the support of the NGO. But we just provide a catalytic role to these community members to be able to have that transformed mindset and understand the principles, but take leadership and ownership moving forward, because we are not there all the time. In these communities, the projects come to an end and we move on. But the communities, this is more than a concept to them. It is their livelihood and they need to take ownership.
Thank you both. I think that's really fascinating there to see how you're moving, sort of starting something, or getting something going, catalyzing something, as you were saying, but then actually it needs to kind of continue and be long-term running and sustainable, whether that's with the technology company, the digital side of things that and the infrastructure that has been put in place, but also the community themselves feel a sense of ownership of that. Jose, I want to come across to you because I know you've got something to say, but also I want to hear a bit more about your business model, because you actually haven't received a single bit of funding to develop your product. I'd love to hear a little bit more, and we've got 7 minutes left, folks, so this will be the last question.
Okay, so exactly, Sarah, we've been bootstrapping since the beginning, but obviously we do not advise that. Not only NGOs can actually give support to this, but angel investors, ESG funds, family offices, corporate venture capital can actually put money into digitization of savings groups. And I see with more VC firms, the surge of more VC firms in Africa, which are, some of them are like me, they've grown out of savings groups. I think there will be more funds allocated to startups like ours to digitize these savings groups. I think it's important to notice that as a startup, this is supposed to be follow the same model as any startup with an unproven concept, which follows the hockey stick, which is 2 to 3 years, losing a lot of money, but gaining a lot of customers, like Wes said. And then you can actually turn and make a profit with additional services and products on top of that. For us, bootstrapping, it took us 3 to 4 years, but yes, we saw the potential. We managed to start charging for the service. It's a little bit different than what Wes in Dream Start Labs did. But if they were willing to pay, obviously we took advantage of that, and we saw that a lot of mature groups, more in urban and suburban areas, they're actually willing to pay for that, and they're more not necessarily unbanked, but they're underbanked, right? It's not they don't have a bank account with a bank, but they actually prefer the community savings. So they're willing to pay, and we took advantage of that. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much. And I think just to emphasize, we're not talking about trying to make enormous profits out of people, but we do know that in order for to scale, to survive, right, there needs to be some money coming back to the organization, and also to continually allow these new innovations, right? You need that sort of flow of cash through a business to be able to do that, for anybody who's questioning why we're going down that line of thought. But I think it was a really important thing to say. So we're in our last 4 minutes. I'm just going to sort of open up to each panelist. Is there maybe if you could just do a 30-second what is your key takeaway message that you would hope that people listening to us will leave with today? Let me start with Anthony.
Yeah, all this takes an ecosystem approach. It means all hands on deck. It's not an NGO thing. It's everyone who's in the digital finance ecosystem to make it work. And we know the benefits outweigh the risks, but we have to also address the risk as we go along. So it's been a good space because I think it actually reinforces financial inclusion in its real sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Angeline?
Thank you so much, Sarah. Let me end by saying that the post-2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development Goals talks about leaving no one behind, and digitization provides such catalytic role to leave no one behind in terms of ensuring financial inclusion. So where possible, let's start all new savings groups to go digital. And where we do have mature groups, let's ensure that we are integrating the youth into that to ensure that they are helping the mature groups to keep up with the technology and digitize their groups as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Angeline. Jose?
I would speak directly to the funds available, VCs and all that, even though there hasn't been much experience with funding fintechs in this space, the market is big enough. And I would call it the Facebook of emerging markets. It's so big that people would be surprised. I think when Facebook started, nobody imagined these numbers. So I think with enough capital, we can actually reach same numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. And Wes?
Well, look, I could just echo what everybody and my colleagues have said, but to me, it's kind of two messages for different people in the audience. So one is if you are in, banking, you're a donor, you're an investor, it's really the message that Jose just said. This is one of the next big financial markets. I'm just convinced of that. This is half of the population in half of the world, right? There's an incredible amount of money there. And for the first time in history, it's possible for us to unlock those services in a way that's beneficial for the users and profitable for everyone along that value chain. Never happened before. And so if I'm in that category, I want to be a part of that early on. And then my message to anybody in the humanitarian sector, in international development, anything like that is, I think we do a grave disservice to these people if we continue to introduce them to these savings groups and then hand them only paper and then walk away, right? Because yes, we've given them part of the equation, but we're getting them further and further behind the rest of the world. And with the cost of mobile phones coming down and the fact that you can give literally one low-cost mobile phone can give access to 30 people at one time. Like, where else in the world do you get that kind of equation? If we're not starting them off with digital, then I would question that, right? And I can just tell you from my experience, 80-some% of DreamSave users worldwide never touched a smartphone before, have never done anything like this, right? And they're using it successfully. They're sitting there as fast as any of us here, right? And so if we think that they're not capable of this and we're delaying because of that, yes, there are obstacles, but let's not make that one of them, right? It is absolutely possible. And so this is sort of an appeal to wherever the audience is, now is the time.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, all of you, for those wonderful closing comments, great appeals and shout outs. I'm just going to wrap up by sharing some of the words that I've heard us say multiple times during this session. We've heard unlock, potential, confidence, power, choice, growth, lift out of poverty, collective, and leave no one behind. To me, if we've had a conversation where we've used those terms more than once over 45 minutes, there's something that we all need to listen to and take forward here. Thank you very much, Anthony, Angeline, Wes, and Jose, for joining me today. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. I think I could carry on this conversation, but I hope we can. I hope that together we might be able to author some blogs and papers on this, because it's really riled me up to have that passion to see those numbers as well, about 500 million people involved, at least $6 million in one country alone. There's definitely something here that we have a duty to take forward and promote and lead. So thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you very much to our participants for listening. And I look forward to seeing you on further sessions as we go through the second day of Pathway to 17. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.